We are 900 AM WURD Philadelphia and 900 AM WURD.com. Follow us on social media at 900 AM WURD. Progressive and proud. Black Talk Media.
By way of introduction, I'm really excited to have this gentleman on. If it weren't for the fact, if he weren't making news, I would still want Byron Allen to be a guest on our show, because I guess for like the last 15 or 20 years, he's silently been building an empire with entertainment studios. They're responsible for 30 some odd shows that are broadcast, all over the country. And he's started out as a stand-up comedian, as we all know. I don't know if our listeners remember Real People, but and then the entertainers.
It's like if they're of a certain age, like you and I, of course, they remember, and just the idea of production and what that really means. I think sometimes our community takes for granted that the dollars and the industry know-how that is necessary in order to produce any television show and make sure that it goes from good idea to being actually created and brought in front of an audience. And so the role of producers, executive producers, is extremely important for us.
Right, but as we know, the Holy Grail is still distribution.
Yes.
So we're in a situation now where Mr. Allen is challenging Comcast and Time Warner and the Reverend Al Sharpton and the NAACP and the Urban League with a lawsuit that has just been filed. So we have him on for the hour to discuss this case and to talk about his career. So
indeed. So Byron Allen, welcome to Real Black Radio.
All right. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Mike D. and Stephanie. I really do. This is great.
Well, thank you. I just want to say on behalf of WURD, we are the only independently owned Black Talk radio station in the entire state of Pennsylvania, one of the few that remain in the nation. So when we heard about your lawsuit, when we heard about the contentions or the basis of the lawsuit, it was something that we identify with very personally, because trying to get advertising dollars, trying to expand audience for us in the position that we are in can be incredibly difficult, and we know that it's got to be even more difficult on the television side.
Yes, thank you. That is the reason for the lawsuit. We filed a $10 billion lawsuit against AT&T and DirecTV, and AT&T is trying to buy DirecTV for $67.5 billion. And what I said in that lawsuit is that when these two companies come together, they will spend collectively $22 billion, approximately $22 billion a year, licensing cable networks and advertising, with less than $3 million going to good folks like you, 100% African-American owned media. And that is very important, because if we don't control and own our media, we can't control our images and how we're produced and depicted and distributed around the world. We don't really have a seat at the table or a voice. And if all of our voices are not heard and widely distributed, then you don't really have a true democracy. And if you don't really have a true democracy in this beautiful country of ours, why did we let all of those brave men and women die in the battlefields? And so we had to file that lawsuit, and we did that December 3rd of last year. February 20th of this year, we filed a $20 billion lawsuit against Comcast, whose headquarters is right there in good old Philadelphia, and Time Warner Cable. Comcast is trying to buy Time Warner for $47.5 billion. And we also sued, along with that, Al Sharpton, the NAACP, the Urban League, and Meredith Atwell Baker for $20 billion. And when those two companies come together, Comcast and Time Warner Cable, they will spend approximately $25 billion a year licensing cable networks and advertising, with less than $3 million going to 100% African-American owned media. Those are jobs in our community. There's some single mother out there who's trying to put food on the table, and she's not going to get that job with your radio station because your radio station isn't participating in the advertising landscape that it should be a part of. And so we said, look, this has got to stop. Now, Comcast back in 2010 wanted to buy NBC Universal. And to do that, they needed to get some love and support from Al Sharpton, the NAACP, and the Urban League. They needed them to endorse their acquisition, a $36 billion acquisition of NBC Universal. And to go to the government regulators, they needed people like Al Sharpton to say, these are good white folks. And so Comcast donated money to Al Sharpton and the NAACP and the Urban League first, and then had them sign this MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. And after they signed it, then their merger went through, and Al Sharpton got additional goodies. He got more donations, and he got a nightly television show on MSNBC, which Comcast now owns. And he got that 6 months after he after he endorsed the merger. Meredith Atwell Baker was a commissioner. She was a commissioner at the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, and she endorsed the merger, and she signed off and was one of the people who approved the merger. And in less than 90 days after approving that merger, the biggest merger in the history of America, she took a job, a higher-paying job with Comcast.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm saying to President Obama, who I love and I voted for twice, and I donated enough money to him to pay cash for a house, that, hey, this isn't the hope, the change, and the transparency you promised us.
Mm-hmm.
And I love you, President Obama, but we've got to do better, because you yourself control over $1 billion budget, a government advertising budget. Join the Army, join the Navy, join the Marines, use the U.S. postal system, and black newspapers and websites and radio stations and television producers aren't seeing any of those ad dollars.
Right.
And President Obama, you bailed out the banks. So if you're going to bail out the banks, why don't you audit the banks, and you will see that they're not lending money to African Americans to buy homes, so that we can refinance those homes and send our beautiful children to college, to buy businesses, start businesses, expand our businesses. You bailed out the automotive companies. Why don't you go and audit those automotive companies, and you'll see that they're not advertising on wonderful radio stations like yours nationally. So, you have to, we have to hold our government, elected government officials accountable. President Obama, you control over $500 billion, $500 billion, pension fund money, government workers, people who work for the government. And how much of that is being managed by black people? Very little, if any. How much is being invested with African American entrepreneurs, like the people who own this radio station, so they can buy more and they can have a network of radio stations and provide more jobs in our community?
Yeah.
Okay. No.
What you're witnessing is what I call it is economic genocide. Economic genocide. Black America doesn't really have access to a real education, mentorship, and capital that is not predatory. And if you don't have those things, they're going to send you off to the modern-day plantation called the inner city, where you have access to plenty of guns, drugs, alcohol, and gangs. And thus, African-American males making up only 6% of the population, but 40% of the murder rate.
Right.
You are positioned to fail.
So, Mr. Allen,
Call me Byron, please.
Byron, thanks for that. So we have the players on the other side. Now, we know Entertainment Studios is your company. Who exactly is the National Association of African American Owned Media?
That is an organization that I started, and I started that organization because these lawsuits are going to continue beyond this. There are going to be more lawsuits. We're going to start to unravel Jim Crow. And so, and in Jim Crow, which everybody needs to go and Google and Wikipedia that, I mean, these were laws that were put in place that by politicians to make sure you didn't have access to education, you couldn't vote, you couldn't live in their neighborhoods, you couldn't have access to bank loans. I mean, it was in some ways worse than slavery, because with slavery, at least you had the hope and the promise of being free. But then once you were free, these laws were put in place to completely shut you down.
Right.
Now, I had acquired the rights to the Coretta Scott King story. She wrote a book called My Life with Martin Luther King, and I wanted to look at Martin Luther King through her eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, hey, Byron, there were 4 major challenges for black people. Number 1, end slavery. Number 2, end Jim Crow. And you must study and understand Jim Crow, and then you'll begin to see the matrix in which you're in. Number 3, we must achieve civil rights. And number 4, we must achieve economic inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of people think that Martin Luther King was murdered because he was pushing for civil rights, but he had already achieved that. They murdered Martin Luther King because he was speaking out against the Vietnam War, which a lot of people made money off of that war, and he was speaking for economic inclusion for all Americans, especially African Americans, the furthest left behind. Now, he was on the balcony of the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis because he was there to do a march with the sanitation workers for higher pay, economic inclusion. And 2 weeks before they murdered him, he gave a magnificent speech that everybody can go online and read called The Other America.
Yeah.
And the other America, he says there are 2 Americas. One America has economic inclusion and privilege, and the other America doesn't. And we can't have a strong America unless there's one America, and it won't survive with 2 Americas. We must have economic inclusion for all Americans.
You have given us a lot as a basis for conversation. I know that there are callers who want to engage you on this conversation as we continue to explore the basis of the lawsuit and what it would really mean if you win, which is something that we absolutely need to talk about. So let's go ahead and take a break now. For those of you who can call, our numbers here in the studio are 215-634-8065, toll free at 1-866-361-0900. You can also tweet Mike or I directly, and we'll read your questions on air. You can tweet Mike at Reelblack, and that's REELBLACK. You can tweet me directly at WURD_S Renee. You're listening to Real Black Radio here on 900 AM WURD, streaming online at 900AMWURD.com, and available if you download our free app for iPhone and Android. We will continue on the other side of this break with more conversation with Byron Allen after this.
Back with Real Black Radio on WRD. I'm Mike D, and we're with Stephanie Renee.
Hello, everybody.
And we have on the hour, we have Byron Allen, who is engaged in a big battle. It's a David versus Goliath situation here, with Byron facing off against Comcast and Time Warner and the Reverend Al. We have a caller on the line.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, and he's calling long distance, so we want to get him into the conversation, so and so he can continue listening. Jay is reaching out to us from New York. Good afternoon, Jay. Welcome to Real Black.
Yes, good afternoon to you and to your co-host and to Mr. Allen. I just have like two quick questions. Number one, I would just like to say that I really respect Mr. Allen's business model. I think he's innovative in what he's doing in regards to TV. I see that Al Heyman is now doing it with boxing. My first question to Mr. Allen is, are you the sole owner of your company, Mr. Allen?
Yes, and that's a great question. I am the sole owner. I started it from my dining room table. I own it 100%. I wasn't able to get any investors, and I started with one television show, and I called every television station in the country from sunup to sundown for 1 year, all 1,300 stations, and asked them to carry my weekly 1-hour show for free. And I said, there's 14 minutes of commercial time. I'll keep 7 minutes and sell it to national advertisers. You keep 7 minutes television station and sell it to local advertisers. And I did that for a year, and after about 40,000 no's, I got about 150 yeses. And my home went, I couldn't find anybody to buy my advertising time, and my home went in out of foreclosure probably 14 times over about a 4-year period. I had timed it that I would just pay my mortgage on the 89th day so that it wouldn't go into that next level of foreclosure when it hit like day 91. And that's how I, tried to eat some days. There were days I didn't eat. There were days my phone was turned off, and we had pay phones back then, and I would call people from a pay phone. And, I couldn't get anybody to buy my advertising time, and I finally turned the corner, and I got the movie studios to come on board because I said, look, I'm having your movie stars on to talk about your movies.
Right.
Please support me so I can be there to support you. I knew the numbers, which is what I always say to Black America. Know the numbers, get a calculator, live by the calculator, and live by accountability. Those two things, the numbers, a calculator, and accountability. And they said, yeah, you're right. We're spending $200 million a year to tell people to go see movies per studio. And I said, just throw me a little bit so I can be there to help tell people to go see your movies. And once I solidified the movie studios, I went on to the next industry, and put on another show and another show. And we had 22 years later, which is where we are now. And we have the largest privately held television library in the world, close to 5,000 hours, 36 television shows on the air, and 7 24-hour HD networks. And yes, wow. I own it 100%. And that wasn't by design. Capital wasn't made available to me. Banks didn't offer me money. Investors didn't come to me. They came to my white counterparts, but they acted like I was invisible. And that's okay, because that pushback, that resistance made me stronger. And when my counterparts hit some headwinds, they collapsed quickly because they didn't have to use their muscle as much as I did. I had to bob and weave since day one. I had to figure out how to keep going when I was hungry, when I couldn't, when the phones were turned off, when my home was about to be taken. And finally, I didn't realize how much it had gone in and out of foreclosure until I went to go buy a car, and this guy basically looked at my credit and said, "Your credit's so bad, I'm not even sure I can take your cash."
But the idea of 100% ownership is a real serious thing that we'll explore in just a moment. I want to get back so Jay can ask his second question.
Excuse me. See, this is where the issue is really going to come into play. Mr. Allen says that his company is 100% black. Technically, he may be correct in all actuality.
Well, I was going to say, Jay, you're breaking up pretty badly. I don't know if you're moving around in your building or if you got some other interference.
Yeah, listen, the reason why I'm saying 100% black owned is what's happening is we have too many scenarios where people are window dressing for what is really white ownership and management. Mm-hmm. And it's a unique voice, your radio station. You are beholding to no one. You're being authentic, and you're of the community, and that's going to be of great service to the community. And this is where you have to hold the FCC accountable. And you have to say to them, hey, we have to have more ownership and diversity in ownership. And that's the other thing. I say, hey, Black America, be very careful of words like diversity and minority, because the definition of diversity, that's women, and quite often white women.
Yeah.
And so now you're at the back of the bus again. So Comcast immediately said, we're proud of our diversity record when this lawsuit came out. And if you really go deeper, somebody wrote an article, and that's one of the great things about this lawsuit. A lot of information's coming out, especially at our website, which is N as in Nancy, AAAOM, NAAAOM.com, and people are registering. And we're finding out that the diversity spend is less than 0.4% as it relates to African Americans.
Wow.
0.4%. And that's why I say get a calculator and hold them accountable. See, you can't be Comcast unless you wire all the major black cities. It's mathematically impossible. So 40% of their revenue is coming from black households because of all the black neighborhoods they had to buy and own and control to even be the number one cable operator, approximately 22 million cable homes. Mm-hmm. They take in $100 million a day, $3 billion a month, close to $40 billion a year from homes paying their cable bill, with 40% of that money coming from black homes. Mm-hmm. And they have 500 channels. And I said back in 2010, none of those channels are 100% black owned, and that's unacceptable.
Well, now, Byron, just to being devil's advocate, I get that cable bill every month too. and they got some black channels. I tune in. I watch Balance. I watch TV One. I watch BET.
This isn't black targeted, and I'm proud of all the black targeted. This is black owned. Hey, Black America, it's okay for you to be extremely wealthy. It's okay for you to have an enormous amount of money, and that starts with ownership. I'm not talking about black targeted, and I'm not talking about black faces. This is black ownership. You can't build a company like mine unless you own the content. You got to own it. You can't have that kind of wealth in your community until you own it. And you have to see a lot of what's going on in this country and what we're seeing in terms of the racial tension in 2015. It's a direct relationship to the economic exclusion. When you have people who are educated and have money, they're not murdering you in the street. That is all of what you're witnessing, that economic genocide. Now that I've pushed you out and with no education and no capital, I can start to dehumanize you. And now I can demonize you, and I can even murder you on tape, and for the world to see and not get an indictment.
Right.
Because you have been demonized. See, that's about not having that economic inclusion, the fourth and final chapter that Coretta Scott King shared with me.
Yeah, we have I'm sorry, we have Jay back on the line.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jay, I think he cleared up his signal. Jay, we need to kind of get you back right to your question if you can.
Right. My thing is, I have to disagree with Mr. Allen when he says that his company is black-owned. In regards to that, reality is he's married to a white woman, so if anything happens, she's going to get a piece of it. And all this really boils down to is this. Mr. Allen would like to own more stations on the format of cable. And in order to do that, he must have this lawsuit. The reality is his wife is white, and he's going to leave it to her or to his biracial children, and that no longer makes it 100% black-owned. And that's a reality that we in the community must face. And I respect the man for what he's doing, but he needs to be more upfront and honest.
Okay, well, thank you, Jay. I don't know if you want to address that.
Well, now, I was just going to say that, I mean, if everybody sitting in this room employed by this station in the black community starts playing the percentages game about how black are you, quote unquote, and how that works, the numbers will never work out in our favor. I think it is important, though, if we're going to play a numbers game with this, Mr. Allen, if you could talk a little bit more about how you set the values for the money that you designate in the lawsuits and how that applies to what benefit that will provide if you come out on top of this.
Well, first of all, I want to speak to what his statement. You know what? Yes, she is. But like Martin Luther King said, don't judge me by the color of by the color of my skin, but the content of my character. Don't tell me the color of her skin. Tell me about the content of her character. Mm-hmm. And you should love your best friend, and you should be with whoever treats you with enormous respect. And the first thing we have to do in our community, we can't be racist. Mm-hmm. We must do exactly what Martin Luther King died for, to be judged by the content of one's character, not the color of their skin. Now, I am African American, and obviously everybody, if you get into the percentages, who knows all the different whatever it is. But by definition, that is who I am, and that is the very definition of what America will say to me, which is great. I love it. I'm proud of it. So what you have to stay focused on is getting in the game. You're not in the game. You're out of the game. And you're out of the game by design. And you're out of the game because it was built that way. So now to go to your question, Stephanie Renee, because I want to answer all questions. And because there is nothing to skirt or hide from. I'm very open. I'm very proud. I don't do anything in the dark that you have, because I know everything's going to come to light. Mm-hmm. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't do drugs, and I never started. And I never started because I never wanted to start anything other people were trying to quit.
Right. How about that?
Life has enough obstacles. Why trip yourself up? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm about, hey, America, let's get stronger. And the way we get stronger is when all of us are engaged. Half the women in this country are living at or below the poverty line. My mother went to UCLA and got her master's degree in cinema TV production.
Nice.
And because she's at UCLA getting her master's in cinema TV production, guess what? It's not a surprise that her son is the largest independent producer, black or white, on planet Earth. Her success is my success. If the women succeed, if the mothers succeed, so do the children. And quite often, if they fail, so do the children. So now to the lawsuit. It's in federal court in Los Angeles. And that lawsuit is to say, you must include us. You can't spend $50 billion a year and black folks get nothing because those are jobs. Now, let's look at the shows I've put on. I have 5 court shows on the air, 4 in production. 1, Judge Ross, the first one to be put on, an African-American male. Okay? The most targeted person in America, the African-American male. I put him on America's court and a very positive role model. He's a judge. Then we put on Christina Perez, 3-time Emmy winner. Christina Perez. We put on Judge Karen, sister out of Miami. We put on Maybelline, sister out of L.A. So there's 3 hours a day right there of African-American judges that are positive on television and a positive role model. Now, go back to 2012. In 2012, there are no African-American family sitcoms on broadcast television. None. 0.
Right.
Beautiful Family in the White House, but not one on TV. So I put on The First Family, which stars Christopher Duncan, Kalita Smith, Marla Gibbs, Jack A., John Witherspoon. The Cosbys in the White House. Okay?
Right.
Then I put on Mr. Box Office. Along with it, Bill Bellamy plays a Will Smith, the biggest movie star in the world, with John Lovitz and Vivica Fox and Essence Atkins and on and on and on. Tim Meadows. There are 3 sitcoms in production featuring African-American families. I produced 2 of them. So who I'm married to doesn't matter.
Right.
You need everybody. I say, if I see a sister married to a white guy, I don't care. All I want to know, that guy is treating her with the utmost love and respect.
So we've got about a minute and a half before we go to break, but I just wanted to just share briefly. I know there's a story that you told on a podcast where you talk about being introduced by the King brothers in terms of there's an old boys network you're not a stranger to.
Yeah. Roger King. I love Roger King. Roger King he called me up one day and he says, I want you to come to my office and pitch me. And Roger King it sold television shows, Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, Oprah. His company at one point was debt-free with $1 billion in cash, taking in $10 million a week, and he ended up selling the company for $2.5 billion. And he said, I want you to come to my office, and I want you to pitch me, if you would, please. And I went to his office, and I pitched him. And he listened to me, and he said, wow. He said, I heard you were a great salesman. He goes, you are. He goes, you really are something special. And he opened up his desk drawer, and he says, you know what? There was only one better salesman than you. And I said, who's that? He goes, my daddy. He says, this is one of his ties. He says, my daddy would have really liked you because my daddy loved great salesmen. He goes, I want you to have one of his ties. And he gave that tie to me, and I was so honored and touched. And he says, now listen up. He goes, he says, one of the other reasons why I had you here is because I know a lot of guys aren't doing business with you because you're black. And he goes, I know that. He goes, because I sold Oprah. And he says, I can't tell you how many guys said to me, I'll never put that N on my station. He said, I got into physical fights with some of these guys. He goes, I threw a chair at a guy in his office. He goes, I got into physical fights because he said, I wasn't raised this way. And I didn't realize how bad it was until I started selling Oprah. And he says, and I'm on the golf course with them, and they tell me how many times you call them, and they laugh and chuckle, and they don't call you back, and they're not going to call you back. And he goes, I don't like that. He goes, now, listen, I'm having a party at my house, in my beach house. Mm-hmm. And he says, I've hired Elton John to perform.
Wow.
And he goes, and I got the Four Tops to open for him.
Wow.
And he goes, I'm going to have a fireworks show and lots of food. He says, I would really like it if you were there at my party. Because every guy who owns and operates a TV station will be there. And it'd be great if you came through. And I said, sure. And I changed my plans, and I came through. And I walked in, and Roger said, hey, Byron. And he came over to me. He goes, so who here is not returning your phone call? I said, everybody. He goes, let's walk around. And he told them all, you know Byron, he's a great guy. He's a hard worker. He said, why don't you return his calls and do business with him, and then we'll talk about renewing Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, and Oprah.
Wow.
And that point on, my company did very well.
I hear that, but at the same time, the lawsuit, even with that hand-holding and understanding of the network and how folks do business, we're now talking about business on a much larger scale. The basis of your lawsuit from the advertisers, which is incredibly important as well. So we're going to hold that, and we definitely want you to break that down for us even more when we come back from this next break. You are listening to Real Black Radio here on 900 AM WURD, and our special guest today is Byron Allen. We will continue with our conversation with him after this.
Hey, and we're back. It's Real Black Radio. It's Friday with Mike and Stephanie Renee, and we have a very special guest. Byron Allen is on the line, and we have a caller. Who are we going to take?
Greg on line 2, calling in from East Falls.
Hey, how you doing there?
Good. How you doing, Greg?
I'm okay. I have a question. Now, maybe you might have answered it, but I just turned it on. But I was wondering when I first saw or got mentioned a lawsuit about Al Sharpton, but I wanted to know: are you suing? Who the company? Because I know Al Sharpton. And the first thing my thought was, well, if he's not suing the company, is this a ploy? Not saying it was sinister, but whether it was a ploy or convenient strategy to get the type of attention that you need. Because I was wondering how could Al Sharpton, even if they did pay him, it would be more of the companies doing.
Yes, we are. We're definitely suing.
Thank you, Greg.
We're suing the company. Absolutely, we are suing the company. And there's a great article in the New York Post. You can find it online, dated, I believe, January 4th. And that article talks about how white corporate America is paying Al Sharpton paying money not to be called racist. And what we're saying with this lawsuit is, hey, AT&T, why would you spend more money, giving more money to Al Sharpton for his lavish 60th birthday than you spent advertising in Ebony magazine in 2014, which was only $30,000 out of $4 billion. AT&T spends $4 billion a year advertising, and they only spent $30,000 in Ebony last year. Okay, they gave Al Sharpton more money than they spent on Ebony magazine. And when AT&T doesn't really do business with Ebony magazine, guess what? They have to sell their building on Michigan Avenue
and their photo archives,
and they have to try and sell their photo archives.
Yeah.
And guess what? They go from employing 1,500 people down to 150 people. That's a job you're not getting.
Yeah.
That's money not in your community. So you have every right to ask AT&T, because you use AT&T Black America. You spend over $1 trillion. Why are you giving more money to Al Sharpton than you spend investing in AT&T? So you have to say, Stevie Wonder has a wonderful radio station here in Los Angeles. Stevie Wonder doesn't get any money from AT&T. What's going on?
Yeah.
Al Sharpton sat on the advisory board of Pepsi for 8 years. They paid him $25,000 a year. During that time, Ebony didn't get any money from Pepsi, nor did Stevie Wonder's radio station. Those are jobs in your community.
And I want to jump in and just say that because we carry in the spirit of full disclosure, we carry a Reverend Al Sharpton show on this station in the afternoons to make sure that people understand this is not personal. You named the NAACP and the Urban League also as a part of this suit. And when it comes to the subject of net neutrality, so we talk about these telecommunication companies and the vested interest that they have. There was a joint statement that was issued by the NAACP, La Raza, the Urban League, and a number of other organizations saying they didn't support the approach that was being made toward maintaining net neutrality. And a lot of people complained and said that part of the reason why they took that stance is because these corporations spend a lot of money for their annual conventions and other initiatives that they have, and so will be shooting themselves in the foot, so to speak, if they were to speak out against these companies in that regard as well.
Correct. Thank you, Stephanie Renee. Because the other thing I say is, look, Al Sharpton doesn't speak for me because I'm a black man. He doesn't speak for black people. There's no white guy that speaks for white people. The very idea that somebody black speaks for all black people, that is racist in itself. And that's where you fall behind. I mean, look, the NAACP, are you kidding me? You, for a token donation, you made what's his name, Donald Sterling, who owned the Clippers, who said he didn't want black people at his games. You made him Man of the Year, not once, but twice. And the second time you made him Man of the Year, you knew about the racial discrimination lawsuit from NBA Hall of Famer Elgin Baylor.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sorry, stop with your token donations, and black people are getting shortchanged. Okay, you can't be in the room negotiating for me and saying all black people are going to be happy with this deal. No, we're not. There's $50 billion a year that we're not participating in, and those are jobs in our community. And shame on you for signing something that said black people are going to be fine with this and giving racial cover. You know what? Listen, I'm going to tell you right now that you need to read what these people are writing in the Washington Post, who are saying, hey, here's what's going on.
Yeah, well, we're going to try and sneak in at least one more caller, and I know Mike has a burning question he wants to ask you as well. So let's go to line 4 and speak to Majesty calling from Glenside. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Steph Renee. Hi, Mike.
Hey.
Hello.
And hi to you, Byron.
Hello, hello.
First, I want to say, you know what? You go get them.
Thank you.
And, I just have to say, I've been watching you for years and years and years and years and years. And I, really had no idea of the nuances of your struggle. And I just want to say that, you're powerful, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hearing your story is just really inspiring. I know that we're at the end of time, so I just wanted to say or put this out there to you that if you ever have any other projects coming up, I would love to be considered for something.
Well, that's what I'm doing. I'm fighting for all of us so that there's more. Right now, there's a drop of water in our swimming pool, and I need to have the swimming pool filled so we can all go swimming. And I'm really saying, hey, Black America, you're so powerful. You are so powerful. You have to insist on your inclusion, and you have every right to do it. And remember, during the civil rights movement, our marches and our Negro spirituals were great. But what really got it done, the lawsuits and the boycotts. When we came off those buses for a year, they said, you know what, we need this money. You sit wherever you want. You can put your butt down wherever you want. We need that money. And you have every right, because I said to President Obama, I love you. But for you to be in that White House, you must remember, white people voted for you. Black people died for you.
Mm-hmm. So that brings up the really specific thing about the lawsuit. There's a very specific law that you're using. You're charging racial discrimination, and it's founded on what law in the book?
It is great question. Thank you, Mike D. It is this law was put on the books in 1866 at the end of the Civil War to protect the newly freed slaves, and it's the Civil Rights Act 1866, Section 1981, and it's 149 years old. These lawsuits must prevail because now you can use it against banks and pension funds to finally achieved the fourth and final chapter, economic inclusion. That's what this is about. See, Mike Brown shouldn't have been on those streets trying to sell cigarettes to feed his family. He should have had the opportunity to own a store on that block. So he wasn't getting choked to death because he was simply working with what he had to provide for his family. This is the fourth and final chapter. This is what addresses the incarceration. Because the 3 strikes, that's another one. You're putting 3 strikes out there, you go to prison for life. Even if that 3rd strike is stealing baby food.
Right.
Okay? See, those are crimes of economics.
Yeah.
I'm not endorsing them, but I'm telling you these are the symptoms of economic exclusion.
I was going to say, we're almost out of time, Byron. I want to try and sneak in 2 more questions, if I may. One we got via Twitter from Eugene Haynes. He wanted to know, who's the legal team representing you, and do you feel you have the money to ride out these lawsuits for the long haul?
Well, yes. I have a phenomenal legal team. Skip Miller's terrific, and I have allocated millions of dollars to this lawsuit because what's at stake are billions of dollars. And you know what? You should go to NAOM, and you should register it in AAAOM. And also, if I can give you some names and some phone numbers, you have every right to call these people and say, hey, I want you to do better. I mean, call the chairman of AT&T. Call Randall Stevenson. His phone number is 210-821-4105.
And is this all published on your website?
We'll publish it there, but, you should call Randall Stevenson. You should call Brian Roberts there in Philadelphia and ask for him at Comcast, 215-665-1700, 215-665-1700, and ask for him. And last but not least, call Tom Wheeler. He is the chairman of the FCC appointed by President Obama, and say, don't approve these mergers unless we have economic inclusion. He's in D.C., 202-418-1006, 202-418-1006, and there's a sister there named Mignon Clybourne, and she was the deciding vote on the last one. And the good folks out of Chicago, Harold Davis, called her up, and now she went on his radio show today, and call her and say, you got to do right by this. 202-418-2100. That's Clybourne. 202-418-2100. And I said in my press release, I have grave concerns about her because she was the deciding vote on the last acquisition, and her father is Representative Clybourne, and he has received donations from AT&T and Comcast. And by the way, the biggest contributor in the state of Pennsylvania to President Obama is Comcast.
Indeed. Well, let's also talk about, I started our conversation today by saying that WURD is a 100% independently owned Black Talk radio station. Is there a specific category that we would fit in with NAOM, or is there...
Yeah.
Okay.
We're 100% black owned, and what we're saying is, corporate America, you need to spend more ad dollars with stations like this. And Stevie Wonder, and you need to spend more with... Ebony is having a tough time. They shouldn't be 70 years, 10 million black readers. They shouldn't be getting less money than Al Sharpton from these corporations. Right.
Definitely. So basically, it's about black owned. It's not necessarily about black targeted.
That's right.
A lot of these black stations that we see are not necessarily owned in majority by some of the people, the figureheads that we see, like Puff Daddy and Magic Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, listen, in this lawsuit, we want to know, what is Magic Johnson's relationship with Leo Hendry? Leo Hendry is a white male who really controls that station. We see these lawsuits will make all the emails come out, all the contracts. We will see all of the deals. That's what we want to see. When it's transparent, all of a sudden everything changes.
And it's very important that you win, because we're talking about how little money is being made, but it's systematic, right?
It is throughout the entire system. You have trillions of dollars in pension fund money that African Americans don't manage or receive in the way of investment. You have trillions of dollars in bank loans that are made that African Americans don't participate in. And listen, you have an African American president, you have an African American attorney general. I'm sorry, Black America, wake up, stand up for yourself, get up off your knees, and demand what is rightfully yours: economic inclusion.
Right,
At some point, you got to be sick of being poor.
And it's against the law not to talk to Byron Allen. It's against the law to have you be considered among the minority groups when talking to Comcast, as opposed to the rest of the stations and being on an equal playing field with the other networks.
The very process of saying you must go through this black process so we can do two supposedly black-owned networks, that is separate and not equal, and that's discriminatory in itself. Treat me like my counterpart.
Well, I tell you what, this hour flew by, and you've given us a ton of information. We want to encourage everyone in our listening audience who's been inspired by this conversation to go to the website, NAAAOM.com, learn more about Byron Allen's organization, learn more about the lawsuits, understand what 100% African-American owned really means, and why you need to support outlets like his and like WURD on an ongoing basis.
Thank you so much, Byron.
God bless America. Thank you so much.
Okay, and I'll see a few of you later on tonight, 7:30, new time at 38th and Lancaster. Stevie Wonder.
Excellent. Well, another excellent program on Real Black Radio. Mike D, thank you so much for bringing that to us. And we will continue with the Friday Night Recharge with Digging in the Crates. Our theme tonight is Press Your Luck, and we'll explain that when we come back on the other side of this break. Stay tuned.